As a fetus, she'd been protected by Massachusetts law, the 24-week cutoff. As a person, she was utterly dependent on a woman who couldn't raise her and didn't want to. Once she became an actual person, Baby Doe was on her own.
I just think that should be required reading for everyone. I want to just talk about, before you read, because I love how you read. You are such a great reader of your work, and that's very rare. Did you do your audiobook?
I've never done one. I've always had an actor read them. And I love, having a hand in choosing the actor.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love the audiobook of Mercy Street. I think that reader is completely perfect.
Who did it?
Her name is Stacy Glembowski, and they let me hear samples of the readers and kind of make the final decision about who's going to do it. And I knew instantly as soon as I heard her open her mouth, like, that's her, that's Claudia. Yeah.
Please read, if you could please read. What is it, page 130?
It's page 130 in the book, and I'll give you just a little background. So Claudia has just counseled a patient who is coming right up against the legal limit for abortion in Massachusetts. So she's almost at 24 weeks. She's almost at the point where she's not going to be able to end her pregnancy. And Claudia has explained this to her. And so after the patient leaves, Claudia recalls this case that was big news in Boston. And I remember when this was all over the newspapers here. It was the case of Baby Doe. So there was a jogger on a beach who found a trash bag that washed up with the body of a little girl in it. And it was this mystery that went on for months in the city of Boston. Who is this child? How did she die? How did she come to this horrible end? And so there was, of course, this massive investigation, and the newspapers were all over it, the Baby Doe case. And so Claudia is recalling the Baby Doe case at the beginning of this. Nothing was certain except this: Baby Doe had died violently. The little girl had disappeared from the world without explanation for months on end, and nobody had noticed. If the tides had shifted that day in March 2008, if one additional nor'easter had battered the Massachusetts coast that winter, the contractor's bag would have been swept out to sea. The child's body would never have been found. These were Claudia's thoughts as she watched the patient zoom down the hallway toward the reception desk, her fake Ugg boots sparking the carpet. On Monday morning, she would be a no-show for her appointment. Her baby would be born addicted to an addicted mother, a child with no soft place to land. Claudia thought of the protesters gathered on Mercy Street, the church-going faithful, the celibate priests and monks. Would they have any interest in this girl, a homeless addict who haunted the brick sidewalks of downtown Crossing, harassing tourists for spare change, if she weren't pregnant? Preventing her abortion was all they cared about. The bleak struggle of her life, the stark daily realities that made motherhood impossible, didn't trouble them at all. I can keep going. Yeah, a little more, okay. What made a person a person? Her mind and her memories, all that she had done and felt and known and created, thought and wondered and seen and understood. A fetus had no thoughts or memories. It had made nothing, understood nothing. And yet, this mute, unthinking knot of tissue, alive, yes, but unformed, unconscious, incapable of tenderness or reasoning or even laughter, was the life that mattered. The woman carrying it, the complex creature formed by 20 or 30 years of living in the world, was simply the means of production. Her feelings about the matter, her particular ideas and needs and desires, didn't matter at all. A fetus was living tissue, no question, but it was not a person. A fetus, at most, was raw material. The woman carrying it could, if she wished, make it into a person. But what was the point of making yet another person when the woman herself, a person who already existed, counted for so little? Baby Doe had been a person, a little girl who felt love and joy, who delighted in her pink leggings and giggled when her toenails were painted, and who, in the end, felt shock and fear and betrayal and pain. As a fetus, she'd been protected by Massachusetts law, the 24-week cutoff. As a person, she was utterly dependent on a woman who couldn't raise her and didn't want to. Once she became an actual person, Baby Doe was on her own.
I just think that should be required reading for everyone.
This book is unusual for me. It's my 7th book, and it came about in an entirely different way from all the ones that came before it. I really have no autobiographical instinct, so I don't really write from my own life. But in this case, I had been volunteering at this clinic in Boston and was so moved by this experience, and also exhausted and heartbroken and alarmed and anything you can imagine feeling, I felt as a result of volunteering at this clinic. It was an intense experience. And, thinking about Claudia, I thought about how wrecked I was by volunteering at this place one day a week. And I thought about, what would this be like? What if this is your daily? The first thing that happens in the novel is Claudia arriving at work and having to, fight through the protesters. And that's an experience I had every time I showed up at the clinic for a shift.
Did you ever feel physically in danger, like someone might?
Not exactly. I had people get in my face. And certainly Claudia does experience that, and people yell stuff at you and all of that. But no, I can't think of a time when I really felt physically in danger, but it was more this, it felt like a pile on. And I was not a person in crisis. I was not somebody, who had gone through what might have been a difficult decision-making process, for instance, or somebody who was in physical discomfort, or, a lot of the patients who came to the clinic were not at their best. And to have these strange, angry men get in your face at that moment, it gets you at a terrible disadvantage. And I think there is a real psychic toll exacted on the people who work in these clinics day in and day out. So that was the sort of the beginning of writing Claudia, thinking about what it costs her to do this work, the reasons she does it, why it's meaningful to her, why it's important to her, which have a lot to do with her background, her childhood, her mother. And then also the toll it takes on her life, working in this environment, dealing with the protesters, and also doing a kind of work that you can't easily talk about with just anybody. She has this thought over and over again in the book that people are always saying to her, I don't know how you can work there. And they're right, and that they don't know. Most people don't know. And so there's something very isolating about that outside of her coworkers, she doesn't have anybody she can share this experience with. Nobody really gets it. And it's not a thing that she can talk about freely with random people. She could find yourself in this conversation you just really don't want to have, because people have very strong opinions on this subject, and a lot of people are nuts. So there's a kind of isolation that comes from doing this kind of work. And that's kind of what led me to Timmy. So in a lot of ways, Timmy is the closest relationship in Claudia's life. He's a weed dealer, and he functions as kind of a first responder in her life. Like it's in these scenes with Timmy where she goes to his apartment to buy weed, that you really see her relax. And I enjoyed writing those scenes so much, just giving Claudia those moments of ease where she's having a conversation with this guy who is a friend whom she trusts. It's a weird kind of friendship, but it is a friendship. And, it's this daily weed smoking habit that kind of allows her to get from day to day. It's what lets her do her life. It's what lets her sleep. So, that's what the stress of working in this clinic is kind of what led me to Timmy, as I was thinking about, what measures does Claudia take in her own life to be able to continue doing this work, day in, day out, year after year.
Have you been approached, or are you in development with a well, we don't call it TV series anymore, but episodic television.
Yeah, there's conversation happening, and I'm excited about it. And it's something that I myself would love to work on and may work on, and we'll see. I mean, it just, as you well know, it takes an incredible alignment of the stars to make anything like that ever happen. And my books always get optioned, so I'm familiar with this process, and I know all the ways it can derail when you need 200 people to agree on something. It's not easily accomplished, but I don't know, maybe, but the conversations are taking place and I'm excited.